The town hall is packed past comfort. Humid night air sticks to the walls, to the collars, to the small metal microphone handle under his fingers. Faces are tight. Signs are raised. Every accusation hits the room before it reaches the podium. And the strange thing is this: public shame does not first ask you to be honest. It asks you to survive. A local politician stands there hearing his own breath move through the mic, steady but exposed, like the whole crowd has been invited inside his chest. One part of him wants to step back. Another wants to say whatever will calm them down, even if it is not fully true. But what is a person worth when pressure can purchase their voice? This is where Fudoshin begins, not by escaping the storm, but by standing correctly inside it. The first danger in that room is not the crowd. It is not the raised voices, not the signs with his name on them, not the cameras held up over shoulders, not the row of folding chairs scraping against the floor every time somebody stands to shout. Those things are real. They are loud. They are meant to push against the body. But the first danger is quieter. It happens inside the local politician before he says a word. His hand tightens around the microphone handle. The metal is slightly damp from his palm. The room is humid enough that his shirt collar feels heavier than it did 10 minutes ago. The overhead lights shine too white. Every breath he takes enters the mic and comes back at him through the speakers, steady, rhythmic, humiliatingly human. In a room like that, breathing can feel like evidence. The crowd is angry, and anger has a way of making one person feel like 1,000. One voice becomes a wall. One accusation becomes a verdict. One mistake, one bad phrase, one clipped answer, and the room can turn colder even in the heat. He looks out and sees people who do not want an explanation. They want impact. They want acknowledgement. Some want accountability. Some want bloodless revenge in the form of embarrassment. Some just want to know that the person at the podium is not hiding behind polished language. And he knows it. That is what makes the moment dangerous. Because part of him wants to run. Not dramatically. Not by sprinting out of the building. The adult version of fleeing is smoother than that. It looks like ending the meeting early. It looks like saying, "We'll take this under advisement," when he has no intention of touching the hardest part. It looks like turning the answer into a fog bank of procedure and committees and future review. It looks like smiling too much. It looks like letting the crowd's temperature decide the shape of his truth. The other temptation is worse. Lie just enough to lower the volume. Not a giant lie. Not the kind that sounds criminal. Just a small softening. A careful omission. A promise he knows he cannot keep. A sentence built to calm the room instead of honor reality. Under public shame, the mind becomes a negotiator. It whispers, "Give them something. Give them anything. Get out of this room with your name still attached to your body." That whisper is the shadow. The urge to flee or lie to appease the crowd. It does not arrive wearing a villain's face. It arrives sounding reasonable. It says, "This is survival." It says, "You can fix the truth later." It says, "Just get through tonight." It says, "Nobody can think clearly under this kind of pressure, so do what you have to do." And that is how a person loses command. Not all at once. Inch by inch. Phrase by phrase. The body leans back before the mind admits it is retreating. The eyes stop meeting the room. The hand keeps moving on the microphone handle, adjusting, readjusting, as if the right grip can rescue the wrong answer. The mouth begins forming sentences designed to escape contact. This is why confrontation is such a severe teacher. It does not test what you believe when everyone is calm. It tests whether your beliefs can stand while your nervous system is asking for an exit. A local politician at a town hall is not just facing protesters. He is facing the ancient human fear of being cast out. Public shame touches something older than reputation. It reaches for belonging. It says, "These people see you as the problem. These people may remember this night. These cameras may preserve your weakest sentence. Your face may become a symbol before you have a chance to explain yourself." In that pressure, the ego begins searching for armor. One kind of ego wants to attack. It wants to turn sharp. It wants to humiliate back. It wants to find the loudest protester, reduce them to a stereotype, and make the room choose sides. That reaction feels powerful for about 5 seconds. Then it poisons the room. Another kind of ego wants to collapse. It wants to become whatever the crowd demands. It mistakes appeasement for humility. It mistakes panic for compassion. It gives away the truth because the truth is making people angry. Both are forms of losing command. Fudoshin does not mean he feels nothing. That would be fake. He feels the heat in the room. He feels the stare of the front row. He feels the sweat behind his knees, the pressure at the base of his throat, The terrible awareness that every pause might be judged as weakness. He hears his own breathing through the mic, and for a moment, even that sound seems too intimate, too exposed. But Fudoshin asks for something harder than numbness. It asks him to let the emotion exist without letting it take the podium. There is a difference between being moved and being ruled. A disciplined person can be affected. He can feel shame rise in the face. He can feel anger knock at the teeth. He can feel fear ask for the nearest door. But he does not hand those feelings the microphone. That is the discipline lens here. Emotion is not destroyed. It is placed under command. The crowd shouts. He does not shout over them just to prove he is not afraid. Someone interrupts. He does not rush to fill every gap with defense. A protester calls him a coward. His jaw tightens, but he does not let that word choose his next sentence. That tiny delay is not weakness. It is the battlefield. Most people think confrontation is won by the person who speaks hardest. But in a room already burning, volume is cheap. The rarer strength is the ability to choose words while the body is flooded. To stand at the podium and refuse both escape routes, the easy lie and the wounded counterattack. The microphone handle becomes the measure of him. At first, it was just an object in his hand. A piece of metal and plastic between him and the room. Now it becomes a test. His fingers loosen. Not because he is relaxed. Because he notices the grip. He notices that his hand has been trying to fight before his mouth has even spoken. That is the first return of command. Not a speech. Not a grand principle. A hand loosening around a microphone handle in a humid town hall at night. The crowd may never see it. The cameras may not catch it. But the body knows. The mind receives the message: we are not running yet. We are not lying yet. We are still here. Then comes the harder part. He has to speak. And speaking under shame requires a clean blade. Not a cruel blade. Not a theatrical one. A clean one. He cannot hide behind phrases that sound official but mean nothing. He cannot feed the room a false promise just because the room is hungry. He cannot pretend the anger is imaginary. He also cannot let the anger rewrite reality. This is where boundaries matter. Fudoshin in confrontation is not passive. It is not standing there as a punching bag. It is not letting every accusation become truth because it was delivered loudly. It is the ability to say, I hear why this matters, without saying, every claim made tonight is correct. It is the ability to say, here is what I know, here is what I do not know yet, and here is what I will not pretend to know just to make this room easier. That kind of answer may not satisfy everyone. But it keeps the speaker intact. There is a version of him that could choose the lesser path. He could step into the microphone and perform sincerity. He could lower his voice, not at the right times, offer a promise large enough to quiet the room and vague enough to escape later. The crowd might soften. A few people might sit down. The night might end with less noise. But he would know. He would feel the lie in his hand, in the damp grip around the mic, in the breath coming back through the speakers. And there is another version of him that could choose violence of language. Not physical violence. The socially acceptable kind. Sarcasm. Contempt. The cold little smile. The line crafted to make his supporters laugh and his critics look foolish. That might feel like strength to people watching clips later. But it would not be command. It would be injury speaking in a suit. The disciplined version does something less impressive and more difficult. He stays specific. He lets the room be angry without becoming the room's anger. He lets shame pass through his body without turning it into a lie. He keeps his feet under him. He hears the breath through the mic and uses it as rhythm instead of evidence against himself. Inhale. Pause. Answer only what can be answered truthfully. Inhale. Pause. Do not punish the crowd for being angry. Inhale. Pause. Do not purchase peace with dishonesty. The storm does not disappear. That is not the lesson. The signs are still raised. The night is still humid. The protesters are still watching his face for weakness, arrogance, or evasion. The microphone still carries every breath into the room. But something has shifted. The confrontation is no longer only between him and them. It is between the part of him that wants relief and the part of him that remembers duty. And for one clean moment, duty stands closer to the microphone. Discipline does not begin after you feel calm. It begins in the first second you realize you are about to lose command. For the local politician at that town hall, training does not look like a quiet room, a perfect morning, or a mind free of pressure. It looks like a humid night under fluorescent lights, with angry faces in front of him and a microphone handle growing slick in his hand. The first practice is simple enough to be missed. Do not answer immediately. When the insult lands, when the accusation cuts across the room, when someone shouts his name like it no longer belongs to him, he lets one breath pass before he speaks. Not a dramatic pause. Not a performance. Just enough space to keep the first reaction from becoming the public record. Inside, he names it without decoration. Fear. Shame. The urge to escape. The urge to lie. That quiet naming matters. A feeling that remains unnamed can pretend to be wisdom. Panic can call itself strategy. Cowardice can dress itself as diplomacy. But when he names the movement inside him, he separates it from command. He does not have to obey everything that appears in his chest. His hand stays on the microphone handle. That is the second practice. He does not grip it like a weapon. He does not clutch it like a railing on a sinking boat. He notices the pressure in his fingers and loosens them by 1 degree. Thumb. Index finger. Palm. The object has not changed, but its meaning has. A moment ago, the mic was the place where his shame became audible. Now it becomes the place where he returns to the present. The handle is small. The storm is large. That is why the handle matters. When the mind tries to fight the whole room at once, it breaks the moment into too many enemies. The front row. The back row. The phones. The headlines. The next election. The clip online. The disappointed staff member standing near the exit. The face of his family watching later. The imagined judgment of people who are not even in the building. No mind can carry all of that and still speak cleanly. So he shrinks the battle. This is the third practice. He does not solve his reputation. He does not solve the town's anger. He does not solve the next 20 questions before the next sentence leaves his mouth. He chooses the next honest sentence. That is all. Not the most popular sentence. Not the safest sentence. Not the sentence that makes him look noble. The next honest sentence. I understand why this feels like a betrayal. Then he stops. He lets that sentence stand without rushing to protect himself from it. The room does not need him to decorate every truth with his own defense. Sometimes the disciplined response is to say the clean part and let it breathe. His own breath comes through the mic again, steady, rhythmic, too loud in his ears. He uses it. That is the fourth practice. He lets the sound of his breathing set the pace of his answer. Inhale before the question. Exhale before the response. One breath between accusation and language. One breath between anger and decision. One breath between the crowd's demand and his own integrity. He does not breathe to look calm. He breathes to remain usable. There is a difference. Looking calm is for reputation. Remaining usable is for duty. A person who only wants to look calm may become stiff, fake, polished, untouchable. The room will sense it. But a person who is trying to remain usable can still be human. His voice may carry strain. His face may show heat. His answer may not be perfect. Still, he is present. That is enough to continue. Then comes the fifth practice. He tells the truth in sections. A crowd in anger wants totality. They want the whole confession, the whole explanation, the whole guarantee, the whole future paid in advance. But integrity often works in smaller units. So he divides the answer. Here is what happened. Here is what I know. Here is what I do not know yet. Here is what I will not promise tonight just to calm this room. That last sentence costs him. He can feel it before he says it. The body knows when a truthful sentence will not be rewarded. His stomach tightens. Someone in the crowd laughs sharply, like they have been waiting for proof that he is useless. A camera moves closer. The microphone handle presses against his fingers again. The old temptation returns. Smooth it over. Offer more. Give them a promise big enough to lower the temperature. But Shugyo is repetition under pressure. It is not one clean breath and then freedom forever. It is returning to command every time the mind tries to defect. So he returns. Hand. Breath. Feet. Next sentence. He plants both feet evenly behind the podium. That is the sixth practice. Not because posture is magic, but because the body sends reports to the mind. When his weight shifts backward, his mind begins preparing escape. When he leans forward too aggressively, his mind begins preparing battle. But when both feet settle under him, he gives himself a third option. Stay. Not as a victim. Not as a performer. Stay as the person responsible for his own words. He lets his eyes move across the room without hunting for rescue. He does not stare only at the friendliest faces. He does not avoid the angriest ones. He looks long enough to acknowledge, then returns to the microphone. The point is not to win a staring contest with pain. The point is to refuse hiding. This is the seventh practice. Do not make the crowd your mirror. If they hate him, he does not become hatred. If they mock him, he does not become mockery. If they demand a lie, he does not become useful to their panic. Their emotion belongs to them. His conduct belongs to him. That boundary is not cold. It is clean. Without it, compassion becomes surrender. Without it, leadership becomes performance. Without it, a public servant can start trading pieces of reality for small moments of approval. He cannot control whether they accept his answer. He can control whether his answer is shaped by fear. So he builds a ritual inside the noise. Grip noticed. Grip softened. Breath heard. Breath followed. Feet settled. Sentence chosen. Truth divided. Promise limited. Repeat. Again when they interrupt. Again when the room groans. Again when his face warms with shame. Again when the easiest lie appears, polished and ready. This is how a person stands unmoved in the storm. Not by becoming stone. Stone does not serve. Stone does not listen. Stone does not answer. He stands unmoved by moving correctly inside himself. The microphone handle remains in his hand, but now it is no longer just the object that exposes him. It is the small gate he returns through each time the room tries to pull him out of command. And the storm keeps testing him. That is its job. His job is simpler, and harder. Breathe. Hold the line. Tell the truth without begging the room to love him for it. The room does not become kind. That is the first honest sign that the transformation is real. No sudden silence falls over the town hall. No protester lowers a sign because one sentence arrived with perfect moral weight. No camera shuts off. No one rescues him from the heat, the wet air, the public stare. The humid night still presses against the windows. The crowd still shifts and mutters. Somewhere in the back, someone laughs at the wrong moment. But the rhythm has changed. Not outside first. Inside first. The local politician is still standing behind the podium, still holding the small microphone handle, still hearing his own breath come through the speakers. Earlier, that sound felt like exposure. It made him aware of every weakness in his body. Every inhale seemed to announce, I am afraid. Every pause seemed to say, I may not survive this room with my image intact. Now the same breath begins to sound different. Not heroic. Just steady. It enters the microphone and returns to him like a metronome. The crowd gives him noise. The breath gives him sequence. He does not have to answer the entire storm. He has to answer the next question without abandoning himself. A woman in the third row stands up. Her voice shakes, but not from weakness. From anger held too long. She names what was lost. She names who was affected. She names the silence she believes came from his office when people needed a clear answer. He feels the old movement in his body. Defend. Explain. Escape. Give her something broad. Give her a phrase that sounds compassionate enough to end the pressure. His thumb shifts along the microphone handle. This time, he notices before the urge becomes language. The handle is no longer a weapon, no longer a railing, no longer a piece of public equipment under his sweating hand. It has become a checkpoint. A small, physical reminder that command is not a feeling. It is a return. He lets her finish. That is not weakness. It is control. The crowd expects interruption because everyone has seen leaders interrupt when they are cornered. They have seen men in suits use procedure as a shield. They have seen public language turned into a maze where accountability goes to disappear. But he does not interrupt. He holds the handle loosely. He lets his shoulders settle. He takes the breath the room can hear. Then he says, "You are right to ask why it took this long to answer clearly." The room does not soften all at once. But it listens differently for half a second. That half second matters. Transformation under pressure often looks unimpressive to anyone waiting for a dramatic victory. It is not applause. It is not domination. It is not the crowd admitting they were unfair. Sometimes it is only this: the person under fire stops using fear as the author of his words. He continues. He does not promise what he cannot control. He does not pretend every part of the issue is solved. He does not throw his staff under the bus to buy himself distance. He does not turn the protesters into enemies so his supporters can feel better. He names what he knows. He names what he failed to communicate. He names the next step without inflating it into salvation. There is still anger in the room. But now his answer has a spine. That is the difference. Before, the storm was moving through him. Now it is moving around him. Not because he is above the people. Not because their anger is beneath him. But because he has stopped letting public shame decide whether truth is safe enough to speak. Fudoshin is often misunderstood as an unshakable face. A cold stare. A personality that cannot be touched. But that is not discipline. That is armor pretending to be character. Real steadiness is warmer than that. It can hear pain without becoming theatrical. It can admit fault without collapsing into performance. It can set a boundary without contempt. It can stand in front of anger and still remember that the person shouting is human, and so is the person being shouted at. The politician looks across the room and sees more than a crowd now. He sees individual faces. A man with his arms crossed so tightly his knuckles have gone pale. A young woman recording with her phone, but her eyes are not on the screen. An older protester with a damp paper sign bending at the corners from the humidity. A staff member near the wall, frozen between fear and duty. Earlier, all of them became one force in his mind. A storm. A threat. A verdict. Now they become people again. That shift protects him from two failures at once. It keeps him from fleeing them, and it keeps him from hating them. When the crowd becomes a monster, you either run from it or fight it. When the crowd becomes human again, you can answer. Someone interrupts him. The room spikes. A few voices pile on. For a moment, the old chaos tries to reclaim its throne. The microphone catches a burst of sound. His own breath disappears beneath it. The moderator leans forward, uncertain whether to step in. The politician raises one hand, not high, not theatrical. Just enough to mark a line. I'm going to answer, he says. But I'm not going to invent certainty where I don't have it. That sentence is not designed to please. It is designed to hold. And because it is not begging, it carries weight. A strange thing happens when a person stops begging a hostile room for emotional permission. The room may stay hostile, but it loses some power to define him. Every insult still lands somewhere. Every accusation still has to be considered. Public accountability still matters. But shame no longer owns the steering wheel. The micro handle rests in his hand with a different meaning now. At the beginning, it exposed his fear. In the middle, it trained his return. Now, near the end of the confrontation, it represents a vow. Every word that passes through this object must be cleaner than the pressure that demanded it. That is the transformation. Not that he wins the crowd. Not that he saves his reputation. Not that everyone leaves satisfied. The transformation is that he can remain answerable without becoming submissive, remain firm without becoming cruel, remain afraid without becoming false. By the final question, his voice is not louder. It is clearer. The storm is still in the room, but it no longer has his mouth. And sometimes, that is the most honorable victory available. Stand there. Breathe. Tell the truth that pressure could not purchase. Your town hall may not have folding chairs, protest signs, or a microphone catching every breath. It may be an office meeting, a family argument, a hallway after a mistake, a late-night message you do not want to answer, or a moment when people are waiting to see whether pressure can make you smaller. The battlefield changes. The test does not. When shame enters the room, your first duty is not to look strong. It is to remain truthful. Feel the heat. Notice the grip. Let one breath pass before your weakest instinct becomes your next sentence. Then speak with a clean spine. And if this lesson belongs in your life, carry it quietly. No performance. No pose. Just one more moment where fear does not get the microphone. Samurai discipline is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming trustworthy under pressure.